Welcome to another episode of the Trusted Advisor podcast and video series powered by the Retail Solutions Providers Association. Our goal on the pod is to accelerate the success of today's and tomorrow's leaders in the retail IT industry. I'm Jim Roddy, back with you again. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a very special episode for you today, something we've never done before. On April 11th, the RSPA Canadian community hosted a networking event at the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto, which featured a discussion between retail strategists Carl Boutet and Michael LeBlanc. Their conversation was packed with details about the retail IT industry, and lucky for you, we recorded their discussion, and we're going to share that with you today. Now, if you're not familiar with Carl and Michael, here's a little bit of background on each of them. First, Carl is a Montreal-based business strategist and executive advisor with over 25 years of operational, marketing, merchandising, and retail executive experience. He's worked across retailer environments for the very large, such as 10 years with Costco, to working as a strategy consultant for a group of 800 independent retailers across Canada. Carl has keynoted on major stages and screens around the world, including NRF Big Show, Shop Talk, RCC Store, Store of the Future, Egyptian Retail Summit, and the Economic Forum of the Americas. And I think we can add to his list now the RSPA Retail IT Canadian Community event that we held in Toronto. And then finally on Carl, in May 2022, he published his first book, The Great Acceleration, The Race to Retail Resilience. Now, Michael is based in Toronto, where he founded M.E. LeBlanc and Company. He serves as president of Maven Media, and he acts as a senior advisor to the Retail Council of Canada and the Bank of Canada. He brings 25 plus years of brand, retail, marketing, e-commerce leadership experience, and he's been on the front lines of retail industry change for his entire career. He's delivered keynotes, hosted fireside discussions with C-level executives, and participated worldwide in thought leadership panels. Maven Media produces a network of industry-leading podcasts, including Canada's top retail industry podcast, The Voice of Retail, and the Dallas-based Remarkable Retail with best-selling author Stephen Dennis, now ranked as one of the top 10 retail podcasts in the world. We're chasing them down. Hopefully RSPA and the Trusted Advisor can get on that list as well. But I digress. Michael, speaking of the RSPA, he's also an RSPA Advisory Board member, a position he was appointed to in 2022. And he's been super helpful giving his fellow board members and the RSPA staff vision into the key trends in the retail space. And related to Retail Now, or RSPA, this coming July, Michael's going to be part of a main stage presentation at Retail Now, sharing the insights he's learned being embedded in the RSPA for over a year. And last but not least, Carl and Michael have both been named top industry influencers by RETHINK Retail, and we're proud that RETHINK Retail is an RSPA media partner, and that the RSPA has been named to their industry influencer list as well. So influencing all over the place in this podcast. All right, last two items of business before we get to the conversation. First, thank you so much to the sponsors who support the RSPA community and make this podcast and video series possible. Our platinum sponsor is Blue Star. Our gold sponsors are CoCard, Heartland, ScanSource, and Star Micronics. And then the second item of business, registration is now open for the aforementioned Retail Now 2023, the Retail Technology Channel's #1 trade show, education conference, and networking event. Join RSPA and Retail IT channel leaders live and in person, July 30th through August 1st at the Gaylord Palms Resort and Convention Center in Orlando. With nearly 200 exhibitors and expected 1,500 more attendees, Retail Now is where the industry meets. For all the details and to register at discounted early bird rates, visit the Retail Now website today at gorspa.org/Retail Now. We've been doing some SEO work. You can just right now search Retail Now 2023, and that should show up #1 or #2 in your search rank. All right, well, my work on this episode is done. For those of you watching on YouTube, I've got my beat up Nerf basketball here, so I'm going to get some shots in. Oh, actually nailed that one. Got it. All right, enjoy the conversation between retail strategists Carl Boutet and Michael LeBlanc.
All right, well, let's get into it. Carl, you and I were together at Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago. We were chit-chatting, and we said, hey, let's...
I thought we were playing the craps table and it didn't work out.
And you were in my cabana, so I was doing some podcasting in the cabana, so we had some fun. Carl will be on my Voice of Retail podcast this Friday, so you hear more from Carl. But for this...
More is enough, right?
More is enough. More is law. Keeps escalating. So for tonight, we wanted to just ask you a few questions, kind of follow up on your presentation. The first question is, as you travel the world, and you teach around the world, you travel the world, you've seen retail from Egypt to Shanghai and you're teaching as well now. What are the commonalities globally? What's the connective tissue that you see, the themes thematically that join all this together in retail? If we were in this room in Shanghai or we were in this room in Vietnam, what are the same things we'd be talking about?
Shanghai is a bit of an outlier right now, but Vietnam, definitely, I was teaching there in December. So I think everybody's really, that the relevance index that was created by Professor Khan 7+ years ago now was sort of just as a research point, but now you can see the effort that companies and retailers particularly are trying to do to just really distinguish themselves, and they have to go all in. So I'm seeing that around the world. So, experiential retail, doing some really, investing in some really, flashy sort of wow factor technologies. So that's something that we're seeing where people are trying to really show the customer, go above and beyond with these concepts. Bland is just, the middle doesn't work. Our friend Doug Stevens has been saying that for a long time.
Sure.
So we see this basically the manifestation of that now really catching up, how these brands are either really going overboard to trying to differentiate on that, or on convenience, something I think we'll talk about the work we're doing at McGill with Circle K. And so they're pushing those boundaries. And remember that, that index basically is a living index. I remind my customers who are trying to measure these sort of things, and they usually take their own approach to it, but I remind them it's always shifting because your competitor is always investing as well. So what are you doing? If you really want to stay above average, the 95% of people think they're above average. If you did okay in stats class in high school, you'll know that there's a problem with that definition. So
you coined the phrase, oft-used, much respected, the Great Acceleration. So it was often heard during the COVID era. It still is heard today. So if you were, and you literally wrote the book about it. So if you were to go back and do a second edition of the book, what do you think you got right, and what would be different about the second edition? And is it a fair question? Do we understand yet the longer term implications of the COVID era?
Yeah, so I think I focused a lot in the first edition of the book on the e-commerce side because that was what we were measuring. What the data points we're lacking in this industry is all the digital influence that we have around e-commerce. So, customers are sort of over-indexed and we push really hard on the e-commerce side. We've seen big companies like Target and others sort of rebalancing that because they sort of neglected the rest, and especially supply chain is a big issue.
The consensus is, we had something like 70% year-over-year growth in Canada. And Canada was a real laggard, which you wouldn't say anymore, really. Canada caught up globally. But would you agree that growth stuck? The percentage of growth year-over-year is trimmed off quite a bit.
Yeah, obviously. But so, it was an artificial. But the idea is, and that's why I keep coming back to that, digital physical strength is, and it's my part is my own doing, is that focus. As soon as people hear digital commerce, they think e-commerce. They don't see all the digital influence that goes around it. Even again, from using that last chart and getting into predictive and prescriptive analytics, which is digital for me, the idea that we're getting to this 50-50 world, Panera is already there. Over 50% of their orders are online before actually people show up. For me, that's the blurring of physical and digital, where we don't really make the difference. And as an industry, retail, hospitality, we've done a very poor job of integrating those two things. We still treat them very discrete, as discrete channels. And we still have the reward systems and the mechanics. We still have stores out there that don't want to take e-commerce returns. This is something you know better than I do because you've been doing this a long. You're in that place too. I did some of it with Costco back in the day, but that doesn't work. That will pull your score, your ease score away. Really right now being below average is you're gonna get hammered. So
and more it's becoming a distinction without a difference. Like, what is an online order? If you research online and buy at a store, who cares? Now the operators who run those channels care.
Sorry, if you're running logistics, you care. Yes.
So it's not immaterial, but it really is
I'm talking to the consumer.
Yeah. The consumer is the channel, as is often said. Our friend we were hanging with in Las Vegas, Phil Waba. If you don't know Phil, he's from Montreal. You're him from Montreal, and he's one of the top retail writers. He writes for Fortune magazine. On the stage, and to us, he described Canada as the Bermuda Triangle of retail now.
Of American retail.
Of American retail, that's right. So what do you think's going on? We've had a lot of high-profile failures. You can go back as far as Sears, but even this quarter, Bed Bath & Beyond, Nordstrom, Lowe's. What's going on? What are they missing? What are they not getting right? And what do you think's going on?
I think it's pretty obvious that there was a lack of focus on the market. So if you treat us like the 51st state, it's not going to work. I was very fortunate to be quite close to Price Club for the big piece of that uptick from the mid '90s to the mid 2000s, and saw that phenomenal growth they had. And I always come back to Louise Wendling. I don't know if any of you have ever worked with Price Club Costco, but Louise was the president. They put a Canadian CEO, they put a full Canadian organization. They actually had two head offices, because before the merger between Price Club and Costco Wholesale, they had Burnaby and they had Laval, and now it moved to Nepean when they consolidated. But they always had a really strong, dedicated national Canadian team, and they had the market for it in that channel, something that Nordstrom's and others probably couldn't afford to put a full sales team in. Yeah. Look what's happening right now. A lot of these brands are actually pulling back their Canadian teams, which I think is a big mistake. Adidas shut down their Canadian.
It's not going to get any better. They got to pay for Yeezy $1 billion worth of Yeezy merchandise that they got no home for. They got to figure out how to pay for that, I think.
Seriously, that's a whole other podcast.
I mean, and it should be said that there are there are vastly more successful international and American companies here. You just named one, Costco. We can go long list, Walmart, Home Depot.
Yeah, so I don't know if the list is that long, but yeah, the independent channel is still really strong here as well.
Yeah, right on. Let's talk about a wobbly unicorn. So the old unicorn phenomenon. We just saw Casper this week sold for a nickel, basically, to Sleep Country, and based on their evaluation. But there's a lot of these unicorns with vast valuation that has now been cut in half, or down to 95% of what it was before. What did they get wrong? And is there still hope for, I don't know, what would you call them, pure play or alternative or disruptor in the retail space?
I think what they got wrong was they built a business model that was predicated on cheap capital and access to venture capital money that was just limitless until a year ago. And so all the focus was on the top line with no focus on the bottom line. In this pivot to the bottom line is really hurting that business model that doesn't have the oxygen left in it to get to profitability. So now they're selling off the parts, they're trying to figure it out and take the losses. But there are still some to your second part of your question, definitely is always going to be opportunity for direct-to-consumer plays that are just going to be, again, differentiated and sustainable. And sustainable, every time I use the word sustainable, I hope in your mind you're thinking not just the environmental aspect, but the economic and the social as well. So I'm seeing a lot of brands emerging. I think the playbook is going to be very different. I work in venture capital a bit, so I invest in some startups, and I mean, the discussions we've been having over the last year are very different than the ones we were having 5 years ago.
What did Warren Buffett say? He said, when the tide goes out, you see you swimming naked. So I think we're starting to see
swimmers out there.
Starting to see a lot of naked swimmers. Let's talk about the state of retail in Canada briefly. So I think we're starting to see, it used to be when you looked at retail numbers, they were either a barometer or a reflection of the overall economic health of the economy. But I think there's been a decoupling more and more, which I think goes under the radar screen a bit, because I see commentators say, oh, retail's off, retail's up, retail's flat, and they think it's broader, but I feel like there's a great distortion of retail sales in many categories during COVID, like bought forward. Yeah. And I'm starting to feel like a lot of those sales have already been bought, and now people are going for experiences and travel and other things. What do you think? What do you make of the state of retail in Canada?
I think aggregation is a very dangerous place to go right now. If you're looking at averages, I think it's your co-host from your other podcast that has a really good saying: the average human has one breast and one testicle. Yeah. It's a saying. So I think if you're looking at that, those averages, it just doesn't show the picture that's really going on, where you have the Lululemons, the Aritzias, that are just rocking it and keep on crushing their numbers with a very focused strategy. And then you have obviously the ones that have been struggling and have really hard time. You know, the U.S. poster child for that's JCPenney, but there's and Sears, which I don't even know. I think there's still 5 of them around right now. But it's just so there's decoupling. What's interesting, I need to do a little more research around that, but I think is the long tail, which I believe for this audience is important to understand, is this independent channel again. So the front of the tail is really compressed. You know, we've gone from probably, especially in Canada, as all the department stores have exited, we're down to basically the Bay, if we can, your former employer.
Yeah. Simon's does a good job.
That was the one that was.
They don't call themselves a department store.
No, and they're incredible, but everything else is sort of this long tail, this indie tail that is really picking up. So that for me is very encouraging. I'm a big believer in the independent channel, and I hope that they find a way. They definitely need your support. So please, I hope you're knocking on those doors as well. I know you are, because it's sort of in your DNA, but that the independent channel and the technology is more and more accessible to that. When selling a POS system 20 years ago, your Epicor, and it was $500,000 starting, to get now, you can put tools. I know you all have tools available for them that, they can easily absorb along with all the other tools that they need.
Michel Sirois has a great phrase. He says you really need to understand what's on their piece of paper when you're sitting in front of any retailer, any restaurateur, any cannabis retailer. Let's stick with independent retailers. You have a lot of experience. You were overseeing helping the Mega Group, which is made up of hundreds and hundreds of indie retailers. What in your mind, given everything you said today, what we're talking about, what is it going to take? What are the key success factors for independents to be successful?
Well, I mean, they're in a strong position in terms. Most of them are financially a lot more sustainable than our D2Cs are. The big challenge, I think, is not just retail, for all small businesses, is finding that next generation. And you could usually feel that. I'm sure you all feel it as well. It's something we talked a lot about is I hope that I'm seeing more and more investments made to try to match those businesses with new buyers, because I think that was always a top challenge in Mega. We were trying to find people to come in and take over those businesses, because when those owners are looking at a 5-year window or less that they're basically done, that the investments stop and the business becomes basically worthless. So how do we maintain that momentum, get them involved so that we have business owners that want to make the investments they need to make to remain competitive?
Let's dive a little bit for a few seconds into the innovation lab at McGill, and you mentioned Circle K, Alimentation Couche-Tard, just such a powerful Canadian company. What kind of lessons are you starting to take away from there? Because I'm watching, if you look, for example, at Amazon with Just Walk Out technology, it has not been successful. Their vaunted 3,000 Go stores is now reduced by 8, so I think there's 5 or 7 or something like that. Now they're having some success selling their palm reading biometrics into Panera Bread.
Yeah.
So they kind of pivoted to we're going to sell Just Walk Out technology versus we're going to run stores. But there's lessons there for for a while it was all going to be shop it like you stole the technology, and it was going to be self-checkout, and what lessons are you learning from that lab, and what can you share with us?
Yeah, it's actually really good. So I imagine, for the Toronto crowd, maybe less familiar with what's happening in Montreal at McGill, but so 5 years ago, McGill, 6 years ago now already, we announced the launch of a retail management school. I say I joined the day 2, basically, the day after that press release. I signed up to support this initiative. And among the retail management school, which is housed in the management program, but we have a fully dedicated retail program, is this innovation lab component. And the innovation lab is actually, if any of you have been to McGill campus, is on Sherbrooke Street, which is a very popular. Michelle came and saw it with me this past December, and we have a fully functional. It looks like for 99% of people who walk into this Couche-Tard or Circle K, it just looks like pretty much any other Circle K, except for a couple of new technologies that they can opt to use or not. And so we've had a couple of really interesting lessons, and we actually have a road show of those lessons in Quebec that starts on Thursday. We're going to go around the province and share some of them. But one of the big highlights for us was, to your point, I think where you're getting at is, we had the first frictionless store in Canada. And it was supposed to be Circle K's first frictionless store in North America, but because of COVID, there was some delays in getting technology set up in Montreal, so it ended up being the first one in Canada. They had Arizona set up a couple months before us. And we thought this was going to be super exciting. We had a dedicated corner. You had with the app, sort of Amazon Go style, check in and go into this dedicated section. It had all the cameras and super expensive setup. And we have obviously predominantly students on campus. It's not just students because we have office towers around us and condos, but 95% probably people are walking are students. So we thought the students are going to love this, right? They're going to love it. It's new technology. New generation love new technology. They're all going to jump in. But anyways, all to say that the adoption was actually very low. The friction was actually, we called it frictionless, and we realized there was a lot of friction, starting with the use of the app and the fact that was, so there's a lot of lessons. We're doing a ton of research. That's why Circle K was interested in the project, because we have all our academics doing a bunch of other background research while this is going on. But while this very fancy, super expensive, frictionless store was set up, this other interesting piece of hardware showed up. It was just sort of dropped in the end of the counter, and it was this little device that basically allowed shoppers just to drop 2, 3, 4, 5 items on this probably 18-inch by 18-inch counter, and it would automatically tally. And it wasn't using RFID, it wasn't using barcode or a QR code or anything like that. It was purely using computer vision. And there was no app needed. You just basically you had your payment terminal, so you just tap your credit card and go. And that little device that we sort of was pushed off to the side had far more success than this very complex and expensive just walk out. Now, that said, so the little device is called the Mashgin. I'm sure there's going to be other iterations of that that are going to come out. Couche-Tard actually committed to buying 7,500 of these to put into their stores around North America. But they are still committed to frictionless as well and trying to figure that out. I think the idea for them, although I'm pretty sure next question is going to be about disbanding of the innovation team, but is the idea that they don't want to be stuck behind. When the time comes where the technology, my curve, is going to catch up, and the cost of computer are going to come down, the cost of bandwidth, all that is going to make it economically more feasible. That's not when they want to start figuring this out. They've already been figuring this out for a couple of years and using our space to help do that. So they've come up with a newer iteration using standard cognition, which is called standard AI, tech stack. It's throughout the whole space. It's an opt-in. It basically, as you walk in, it starts tracking what you're picking up, and you can just go to the regular till and pay for there. Or if you have the app loaded on your phone, and when I say tracking, by the way, there's no personally identifiable information until you get to the payment stage if you opt to pay that way. So they're still playing around with it, and it's a lot of lessons learned. Number one lesson, it's not because it's the younger generation they're necessarily that much more inclined. If the technology, if the app, if the user experience, actually, they're harder to convince, because as soon as the technology becomes a little complicated, they just bounce off because they're used to using all these social media tools. They're super intuitive, and as soon as it becomes moderately complex, they're out.
All right, we're going to wrap this up with a rapid fire round. I'm going to give you one word and or one phrase, and you give me a one-word response. You ready?
So,
AI.
I must.
The metaverse. Metaverse. Retail media networks.
Massive.
Poutine or brisket?
Come on, next question.
Favorite holiday destination?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Morocco.
Twitter.
Meh.
TikTok.
Scary.
Retail cannabis. Please.
Sorry?
Please.
Please.
Retail cannabis.
Yeah, it's a big industry, so I guess a big.
Virtual reality.
Augmented.
Self-checkout.
Not if, when.
Amazon.
On the decline.
Most underestimated retail technology.
Payment.
Most overhyped retail technology.
VR, digital twins VR.
All right. Habs, Leaf, or the Senators?
go back to the preceding question.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Carl Boutet. Thanks, Carl, for joining me. It was great. Thank you all.
That does it for this special episode of The Trusted Advisor. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. If you did, be sure to subscribe to the RSPA YouTube channel and the Trusted Advisor podcast so you never miss an episode. We'd also appreciate if you'd rate us wherever you find your favorite podcasts. My personal philosophy is the more stars, the better. Before we go, big thanks again to Carl Boutet and Michael LeBlanc for sharing their wisdom with us today and sharing their wisdom during the RSPA Canadian Community event back at the Hockey Hall of Fame in mid-April. Thanks also to RSPA Marketing Director Chris Arnold for his production work, Joseph McDade for our music, and last but not least, thanks so much to you for listening. Our goal at the RSPA is to accelerate the success of our members in the retail technology ecosystem by providing knowledge and connections. For more information, visit our website at gorspa.org. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, everybody.